So for the month of June, we decided to do this little challenge where you pay attention to your behaviors and habits and kind of take notes on them and try to figure out what are some things that you repeatedly do, um, and try to figure out why you do them. Right?
Yeah,
That's
that's
pretty
fair.
much what we did. Yeah.
hmm
So we're going to talk about what we found out during that exciting month of behavior analysis.
Well, yeah, so the kind of spoilers that didn't go super well, I think, for either of us, or really anyone except maybe one or two people in the community. It just fell a little bit flat, and I had a hard time sticking with it, which is kind of funny that our Observe Your Habits challenge involved creating a new habit that we all failed to do. Uh, and that by itself, I think, is interesting. And I think it mostly comes down to the challenge being kind of stupid. But we can get to that because actually, I did make some observations, even though it did fizzle out a bit. I did discover some things that actually were pretty interesting. Um, and hopefully, you got something out of it as well.
Yeah, well, I started off, and I jotted down some notes and paid attention to some stuff, and I was like, oh, this is going to be cool. I'm going to learn a lot. And then I just kind of fell off and didn't really do it. I have one reason was that I think it just wasn't very specific. It wasn't um, very clear cut. We're just like, okay, observe your habits and behavior, and then
Right.
see you in a month. And so you can't leave me a loophole like that. For the challenge where we wake up at the same time every day, that was very specific, and
Yeah.
you can't screw that up. So I could do that one. For this one, it was too nebulous. So I kind of fell off. But I did find a couple little things that actually have stuck with me that I think are kind of interesting. Um,
Okay,
but yeah,
let's we can talk about why it failed, but let's start with that because there was some value in it for me too. So let's just start with that. Like, what did you find out? Let's just kind of act like it wasn't a bomb. Start from there, and then we can get into what's wrong with the whole design of habits and just the philosophy behind habits in general. What did you find out?
okay. Well, I wanted to see. Well, first I just wanted to find some things that I do. When you say habits, I don't know. I guess I don't really know the exact
Oh,
definition of a habit, but
let's
um,
not worry about that. Behaviors, repetitive things, any whatever. Just define it as loosely as you like for this.
right. Okay, so here was a couple things. Um, One is I was doing pull-ups every morning, right? And that was a thing that I was sort of trying to make into a habit,
hmm
and I had been doing that for a couple months. So I was doing pull-ups every morning, and then I used breakfast as one, right? And then um, just sitting at my computer. Okay, so let's take the pull ups in the morning. The goal with the pull ups was to do them every morning. All right, and I tried to connect that to to breakfast. This is more interesting than it sounds. Um,
Okay, that's true of
so
everything we talk about. It's more
now,
interesting than it sounds to everyone else.
yeah. So the plan was initially is to do them uh, right before I eat breakfast. So I make my breakfast and then I do the pull ups and then I eat my breakfast. But what started happening was I would eat the breakfast and then not do the pull ups. And then be like, oh crap, I'm supposed to do the pull ups. And then I wouldn't do them. And then right before I had to go to work, I'd run back inside and do the pull ups or something. And I realized that I was looking for the cue that made me finally actually do them. And I realized that it wasn't anything really concrete. It was this feeling of guilt. Like it was a bad feeling that
Yeah.
caused me to do them. And it was like this every single day. I mean, sometimes that guilt would kick in before I, ate breakfast or whatever. It wasn't always right before I left for the day. But what I realized is the thing that finally got me to do the pull-ups was not this, oh, I want to be a big strong man or oh, I want to be healthy today. It was I feel guilty about not doing them. I guess I'll just do the stupid pull ups. Like it was always triggered by this bad feeling.
Yeah.
So that was one thing that I noticed, which I just thought was interesting because when you think about, I don't know, fitness related things, you don't usually think of them as being kicked off by some sort of negative feeling. But we'll set that aside. Okay, so another interesting one that I found was that you ever have those days where you plan on doing a whole bunch of stuff? So you get up and you're all excited for the day, and then, I don't know, 8 hours have gone by and you realize that all you've done is watch a bunch of YouTube videos and wasted your life on the internet. Whatever.
That has happened to me once or twice.
Right. So I had one of those days. It wasn't quite 8 hours, but it was this long stretch of time where I'm like, oh God, I watched too much YouTube. I can't do that again. And I think that's what most people would do, is they think, okay, I watched too much YouTube or too much TV or whatever. I shouldn't watch YouTube again, or I shouldn't watch YouTube or shouldn't watch TV. I shouldn't do that thing as much anymore. Like that's the conclusion that we all come to.
Yeah.
But I started noticing that the thing that got me into that was when I walk into my office, I immediately, just without even thinking, it's just a habit, I walk straight to my computer and click the mouse and wake it up. Like it's just the thing that I do without even thinking.
That exact thing is on here too.
Okay, good. Because this was a big one for me, even though it doesn't sound like much. So, you click on the mouse and then really without any conscious thought, you click on something else. Before you know it, you are hours down the road. And I realized it's sort of this, it's like when, I don't know, like if you have a river and it starts branching off, like if you cut it off right then, all you got to do is like, I don't know, put a big stick in the way or something, and it, it blocks the flow of water right back into the main stream. But if you let it kind of get out of control, it makes like a second river. And like, if you want to change things, then you have to build a dam and like reroute the stream, and like you got to do all kinds of work, and it's very difficult. But if you cut it off right at the beginning, you're hardly doing anything. So I made a couple changes to my office where, now my desk is on default standing desk. I moved my chair to my drawing desk, and I just tried to set it up. Now I'm shutting my computer off in the morning, so I have to boot it up, So I just changed things around a bit to where I don't go straight to it. I go somewhere else first. So that was a big one for me.
Oh, that's so funny, because of the whole month, out of every behavior that we could have observed, and we live very different lives and all that stuff, that exact thing, literally that, of me walking into the office, hitting the left shift button on the keyboard, because that's just, for whatever reason, always the button that I hit to wake it up, waking up my computer, and then just starting to engage with whatever is there. That was like the number one thing that I observed that was disrupting my behavior and just the general pattern of every day, was that, exactly that. And the changes that I made were, one, I made my computer go to sleep a lot faster so that I wouldn't see things as much, which isn't quite the same problem, but it was related in that I just, if I saw my computer screen, like a notification popped up, I would engage with it. So like I have the computer go to sleep. I have my second monitor off by default now. So I have to intentionally turn it on. And then when the computer goes back to sleep, it leaves the second monitor off, because I would be working and I would just constantly see stuff on this second monitor of notifications and, other things. Pretty much by definition, I want to do one thing at a time. So having two monitors totally violates that. And then same thing, like I've been shutting the computer down. I've been like adding a password lock to where if I need to open it, it takes a little bit longer, and all of that stuff. Exact same thing. Because the computer was just this radiating source of that distraction, and the same problem as a phone in some sense. But yeah, that was top of my list.
I also, because we've been keeping our phone in one place, you're still doing that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Actually, lucky me, I dropped my phone for the 100,000th time, and so it's holding the phone is like holding just a handful of glass. It's so shattered and busted and awful. And this last time when I dropped it, something in the LCD broke, so there's this giant bright green stripe on one side where just the pixels are lit up like a beacon. So like it's such a busted phone at this point that it's awful to even use, which I mean, I don't know how much I paid for the phone, but it was a lot. It's this very valuable item, and it's very funny to me that the more damaged it gets, the better my life becomes, because that device is mostly a negative on my behavior and my anxiety levels and everything. That like the worse the phone gets, the happier I become. Uh, anyway, to answer your question, yeah, I don't mess with my phone anymore.
Yeah. Well, the worse that gets, the happier life becomes. That's sad. It's true though.
Yep, it is.
But yeah, so I've been keeping my phone in my office as well. So when I go into my office, I do one of two things. I click on the computer or I check my phone. So I'm trying to, like, even with, I'll spend the rest of the day without my phone, and that is going great. But still, when I come into my office, it's like one or the other without even thinking. A couple hours ago, my power shut off because there was this big storm. Power went off, and it's totally dark in my house, or almost totally dark. And every room I walk into, I try to flip on the light. And I know that the power's off, but I'll flip on the light, realize that it doesn't work because the power's off. I'll walk into the next room 2 seconds later, try to flip on the light again. And then I'll stand there and be like, God, I'm such an idiot. And then I look over and my hand is flipping on the light again. Like, it's just, I have been trained to have this habit of when it's dark and I can't see, you just flip on the light. Like, that's just what you do.
Yeah.
And it is to that level of like subconsciousness that turning on the computer or checking my phone has become. It's that same level of just no conscious thought. Just do it, And it can lead you, not the light switching, although it could up your power bill. But with the computer or the phone, it can send you down this very bad path. So that was one of the biggest reoccurring behaviors that I noticed. Oh, but okay, let me try to make this point. So I was paying attention to what caused these behaviors or what caused these habits. Like for the pull-ups, it was this weird guilt feeling. Like it wasn't based on a time. It wasn't based on anything else. It was just based on a guilt feeling. For the computer or the phone, it was based on me just walking into the room. Because it's in my, it's in proximity, I just do it. Like that's the habit that I've developed. Just this, when I'm in this room, I just click this thing, whatever. But then I also noticed breakfast. Like for breakfast, like I'll get up early, work and do stuff and drink my coffee, whatever.
Yeah.
And then I don't eat breakfast for, 2 hours or something. And I only do it when I start getting hungry. Like when I get too hungry, then I just go make breakfast. So for that, the cue is hunger. It's not a specific time. It's not, I don't know. So I don't know. There's just all these different little feelings, or like some of them are, I'm sure there's like a great master category list of all the things that cause habits. But for me, there was, like a time thing. For like, when I wake up, there's a specific time. Alarm goes off, then I wake up. And, there's a specific time I have to be at work. So specific time of the day is one. A feeling like the guilt for the pull-ups is one. Right. Environmental, like where you walk into your room, would be another one. I don't know. There's just a bunch of different categories of triggers for behaviors. Did you start noticing that?
Yeah. So
okay.
One of the things that I try to come up with a name for this. So while you're talking about the guilt thing, is what I would call a reverse cue. Here's an example. So one of the things that I still am doing, but was doing previously this past month, was trying to create kind of this new habit around not eating after 8 p.m. I wanted to do, I've done like intermittent fasting pretty consistently for a long time, but I wanted to tighten that up. I listened to some podcast that talked about how the 8-hour eating window is really good, and just got me kind of more excited about that again. It's like, okay, I want to tighten it up. I want to make sure I'm eating from 12 to 8. And so I would have this alarm set or reminder, whatever, at 8, like, okay, no more eating. And then after a little while, after kind of observing that, what would usually happen is it would be 8 and be like, I haven't eaten a meal in a while. Like, I'm super hungry. I got to eat. And I would eat past 8 and I go, I messed up. I failed. But after thinking about it for a little while, I realized that that's so stupid because time goes forwards, not backwards. When the reminder goes off, it's too late. 8 o'clock is when I should have already done something. So it's stupid to, have a reminder or, just thinking in those terms was completely wrong because it's stupid. I can't go back in time and eat a meal. What I can do is say, okay, at 7:15, that's when I eat my last meal. So 7:15, oh, now's the time. That cues me to go, eat the meal or prepare whatever I need, eat it, and then I'm done. And then I'm not worried about the exact minute I'm done eating. That solves the problem for me. But same thing there. If your cue for doing pull-ups was eating breakfast, but you're supposed to do pull-ups before you eat breakfast, that, like, the time arrow goes this way. You can't be eating breakfast and go, oh, I should have did pull-ups already. So it's just a bad cue. It doesn't make sense. It's backwards. So what what happens is exactly what you said, which is you wind up with this feeling of, oh, I missed it. I feel bad. I feel guilty. And then that triggers you to do it. But really, you've created a system of breakfast, guilt, pull-ups. And for me, it was, 8 o'clock reminder, guilt, eat, too late. And it's literally a very simple formula for failing that habit every single time, or doing it in a way that's not what you wanted. So that's what I would call the reverse cue. And it sound like when you lay it out, you're like, wow, that's super obvious and dumb, hardly worth bringing up. But at the same time, I messed that up for tons of things. Just was a mistake I kept making. And I think it's actually a really common thing that we don't think about.
Well, hold on. You're saying that you messed it up, that it's a mistake. But that's only if you're looking at habits as being like a habit must be easy in order for it to last, right? Like if that's what you're judging it by, then yeah, you made a mistake. But is that common knowledge? Because when I think of habits and you hear about, I don't know, buzzword habit making, whatever.
Yeah.
It's like you need to develop willpower in order to, create a habit and do the super hard thing every single day for the rest of your life. I don't think it's common knowledge that habits need to be easy. And even if it is common knowledge, it's really hard. It's hard to make it easy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about that. Because that's what I was really reflecting on this past month. Part of that was, again, the fact that the habit challenge itself was poorly designed. Here's what's funny. So we set out this challenge of, okay, observe your habits for the month. And that challenge was badly designed for lots of reasons. And for everyone who tried it, me included, I'm halfway through the month and I'm thinking, I've hardly done this at all. I suck. I'm bad at stuff and doing things, and I didn't hardly do this challenge. And I'm just entirely blaming myself, which of course you should do, because one of our core principles is that everything is your fault. But I blamed myself in the wrong way, which was, oh, my willpower's bad, I'm a procrastinator, whatever. And what didn't really occur to me until the end was, oh, this challenge is stupid. It's totally non-specific. There's no cue and action involved at all. It's just, oh, do this sometime during the month. There's nothing concrete about it.
If it had been, find 5 habits that you do and figure out their cue,
right?
That could have been much easier. But the fact that you didn't know an ending point, and this goes for any habit that you're doing, if you don't know the ending point or what you're supposed to actually do, you can't succeed at it. And no matter what you do, you're a failure. So
yeah. So yeah, there's so many ways that this was stupid. One of them was that it was one of the things that we said, I said actually, was, oh, this probably won't take you all month, so just, do it until you're satisfied or whatever, right? So that's extra dumb for a couple reasons. What I notice when I attempt to start a new habit, and uh, we everyone does this, or certainly me, we do this all the time, constantly. We see something that we like or we're excited about. You listen to a podcast on intermittent fasting and how wonderful it is, or almost anything nutrition related leads you to think, I want to do this new habit, or fitness, or with work, or anything. We're constantly getting excited about something and saying, I'm going to do this new thing. For me, again, it was this intermittent fasting, right? So you pretty much every time you get excited. That's kind of what convinces you to do this thing in the first place. And so you get this bit of an arc of the novelty phase, right? Where you're excited about it. And when you're excited about it, that's just what you're thinking about. You've been promised all these things of, oh, there was this mouse study and the mice live for way longer and it's so good. And, people are like getting so healthy on intermittent fasting. It's a miracle, right? You collect all this hype and all this stuff that makes you really want to do it. And so that kind of spikes your motivation. You're really excited about it. And that means that you're thinking about it all the time. So for me, those first few days, it's 7 o'clock and I'm like, oh, I got to go eat because I'm going to do intermittent fasting and I got to get my eating window. But that's stupid in the long term because it only works during the novelty phase when you're excited about it. The thing that triggered me to do it was me just being excited and hyped up on this stuff, right? So pretty much by definition, that will not last. That can't be sustainable because all I'm doing is establishing this response to a behavior that's super temporary. Like I know in 2 weeks, I'm not going to be thinking about this anymore. I'm not going to be listening to podcasts on intermittent fasting and I'll be on to something else. So I'm like building habits around this thing that's going to go away guaranteed, this novelty excitement thing. So there's the novelty phase, which is what we tend to try and build behaviors around, which again is by definition stupid because it's going to go away. The way we should think about it is to think about, well, okay, you said that you need a goal or an ending point, right? So I could not agree more. If you're trying to install a new behavior, then you have to think about what it's going to be in the long term. And the only reasonable goal for most things is a completely unconscious habit that you don't even realize you have anymore. Not everything quite can be that. If you're trying to go for a run every morning, then you're never going to forget that you did it. But you want to get as close to that as you can, because if you're still thinking about it and having to dedicate all this mental energy to this new behavior, then what happens when the novelty phase begins for something else, or you're concerned with other things in your life, or you can only fit so many things that occupy your mind space, if you're super excited. So it has to be something unconscious. So, okay, all that to say this, whatever the plan is, you have to account for that, in that you're going to have your excited novelty phase, and your goal is to create something that just disappears into the background of your life by the time that novelty phase is over, because that's how it's sustainable.
Okay. There's a novelty phase for every habit. I really like that because that's exactly what I go through every time I try to start something new. And I've started, well, okay, it seems like people get really excited, me included. People get really excited about a new habit, or, take the intermittent fasting. Had a little too much wine. Take the fasting, for example.
Yeah.
You're all excited about it because you just listened to the podcast. And while listening to the podcast, you can remember everything they said about all the good reasons why you should fast. And you can keep those in your head. You're thinking, oh, well, the mice live longer. I want to live longer, and it's really good for this and whatever. Science. Yeah. Bunch of reasons why it's so great to fast. But as the novelty phase fades away, you forget those reasons. I mean, they're just, they're gone. They're out of your mind. You're not really thinking about it. You remember that it's very good for you, but you don't totally remember exactly why necessarily. And I think what happens is that we forget the reasons why we're supposed to have these habits in the first place, or why we want them in the first place. So as time moves on, the novelty fades, of course, but also the reasons to keep them fade. And you end up with this hollow thing that you just do.
Yeah.
And then you reconsider and think, oh, yeah, it's not that important to do this. I'll do this other new thing.
Right.
So you just lose it. So I think this whole, I don't know, obsession with habits kind of annoys me, because it seems like people just want to start a habit to start a habit. They're like, I want to be healthy all the time, so I need habits. I need to collect some habits. That'll make me healthy. But they forget about the reasons why we actually need them in the first place, I guess.
Well, I mean, do you what's your solution to that? Or
I think if when we think about habits, we typically think of them as just being this thing that we do either every day or every few days forever, just indefinitely.
Yeah.
Right? We don't typically think of an end goal for them. And I think if you look at athletes, if you look at, I don't know, people who are just really good at stuff, the habits they make, even if they're very long term, they're typically for a specific either event or reason. Take you with powerlifting. I don't know anything about powerlifting.
yeah, you do. It's pretty simple. You lift stuff.
But you have specific numbers that you want to hit by a specific date, right?
Yeah.
So you create all of these habits to make sure that you hit those numbers on that date, right? And then once you hit those numbers on that date, you make another plan to hit that specific thing in a very specific date in the future, right?
Yeah.
So it's not this indefinite, forever expanding habit that you just do because it's good. You do it to hit an achievable goal. And for these, like, this quest that we're both doing, I'm doing my art stuff, you're doing your programming stuff.
Mhm.
There's very specific things that we want to do. And in order to do those things, you have to have a consistent habit. But it's not just an indefinite habit. If you just try to practice guitar every day indefinitely forever to just be good at guitar, it doesn't really work. Like you forget about the reasons because there never was a clear reason to begin with.
Mhm.
I think you'll find if anything is successful, it's because there's a specific event or specific reason included in it in the future.
Okay, so I like that. There, part of me disagrees a little bit in that, I created a habit to brush my teeth every night so that they don't become
Okay, yeah, that
disgusting or whatever. Right? I mean, there are some habits that you're just think I want to do this forever, like the intermittent
But-
fasting. My plan is to do that indefinitely. I don't know if that's a good plan, but I do think there are some habits where that is at least your intention at the start of, okay, I'll
Well-
do this forever.
for the brushing your teeth thing, the plan or the reason doesn't have to be this far off event thing. Like you're not brushing your teeth every night to, for the teeth brushing competition.
Right.
That you have a reason for it that day or that night or that morning. So the reason comes back every day. I don't know.
No, I know what you mean. And I agree that oftentimes during the novelty phase, you get excited about something and you basically, maybe not in explicit terms, but you think to yourself more or less, cool, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. And it works for the week or so that you're in the novelty phase. And then again, you create this habit structure around something that's completely ephemeral and is going to be gone, which is very stupid. And then it's gone. And then you're off of that. And pretty often that leads into these guilt cycles where you feel like, oh, I fell off the wagon again, or I was going to do this diet and now I didn't, or whatever. So I agree. I think that, at least in the sense that trying to define the scope and duration and all of those things around a habit is pretty important. Even if you want to start doing something physical to say be healthier, that's a long-term goal. But if you define a year or 6 months of, okay, I'm gonna do this running program for 6 months, and then I want to see where I'm at. That's one way more concrete. So you could say, okay, 6 months, this is my goal, this is what I'm going to do, and you can measure what happened. Like, is my resting heart rate getting lower, is my body weight dropping, if that's something you want or whatever. Like, you can make that kind of evaluation and then go, okay, you know what, maybe this running program isn't really what I'm after, or maybe I would rather be doing some kind of lifting or whatever it is. Or maybe the health improvements that I want are more related to diet and things. But by defining it that way, it gives you this great opportunity to make the evaluation. And then if you want to do something else, you can slot it into that same habit area where you aren't having to create a new behavior out of nowhere. You could say, okay, I'm going to move this one out and move a new behavior in. But that seems a lot easier than just going through those cycles of, oh, I'm not really running anymore, I feel bad, I'm a failure. That's just typically what we do.
Right. I think that's what I'm saying. It's just, I don't know. I've always done better if I have like a specific goal that
Yeah.
habit actually is working towards, instead of just, I want to do this every day forever,
Right.
you know.
My biggest thing that I've taken away from this, in terms of habits, right? At least, like, I've been trying to kind of define habits a little bit and create this formula in my head for, if I want a new behavior, what is the recipe for that? What do I need to do to make it very likely that I can establish this new behavior? And I think there's a few steps to that. One,
Wait, before you give real reasons, I asked my friend, because I was thinking about this stuff, and I said, what do you think it takes to make a successful habit? They said consistency. And I said, okay, so what
what
do
an
you think it
amazing
takes?
answer.
What do you think it takes to be consistent? And they said consistency. And I was like, God, humanity's screwed. But okay, go ahead with your.
Yeah.
I just because I well, I have a better idea now, but I think, I don't know, that's just sort of how it's always been. It's like, well, do it every day if you want to get good at it. Okay, well, how do you do it every day? I don't know, just be consistent. How do you be consistent? Just have willpower. Well, how do you have willpower? I don't know, just be stronger. It's like,
It's like that thing where they teach you in elementary school that you can't define a word with the same word. That's not allowed.
right. Yeah, the definition of each word is just the other word.
Right. Like, oh, a habit is just doing something consistently. Well, how do you, well, yeah.
Okay, but you're about to answer it all for us, right? So,
Well, okay, no, but I'll give you my best take. I would think of it this way. How do you create the highest chance of success that you can for a new behavior? Because it's freaking hard. I mean, the if you actually observe the number of times that you try to create a new behavior and you fail, it's astonishingly high. It's terrifying to even think about how often you fail at this very, very frequent common thing. And again, I don't think we have, there are some instructions. I think Atomic Habits was a good book, and there's some other things, but there's not a whole lot on it. Okay. First, you get excited about the thing. I think you want some motivation. That's what gets you to want to do this new thing in the first place, right? And actually, one thing I'll do is, every so often I'll sort of take a pass at like health related stuff, or wanting to get into a new workout routine or diet or something like that. And usually the way I start that is I will just find some videos or podcasts or anything that are just talking about these things and listen to people just talk about them. And often enough, it's stuff that I already know, already heard about. They're referencing studies that I've already read. Like, it's not really even new information sometimes, but it's just this environment of people talking about this thing, and it kind of gives me that excitement thing of, oh yeah, this is cool. Kind of like you said, where you forget all the reasons that you were going to do something or why it was so great, but if you kind of put yourself back in that mindset of, oh yeah, eating well is really awesome and it does all these great things for you, then you just kind of build up that hype again, even if it's not new information. And
Right.
actually, I think that's most of what people are doing on YouTube. It's not teaching you new stuff you've never heard before. It's just letting you listen to somebody be excited about this thing. So that's the first phase, is like build up the novelty phase. Like embrace that. You should be excited. You know, motivation is good. Like get excited about it. And you create for yourself this little window, which I think is usually around a week or two. Kind of depends on the thing, but it's somewhere in that neighborhood where you're excited. You're thinking about it a lot. So you've got like this, you know, when I was first getting excited about intermittent fasting, or you know, this time around last month, it wasn't hard. It was actually the only thing I wanted to do. You know, at 7 o'clock, it's like, oh yeah, okay, gotta do it. Intermittent fasting. This is gonna be so great. I'm gonna be so healthy and fit and stuff. You know, it's like it's it's not a difficult task. It's like a rewarding, exciting task because that's the thing I'm thinking about. So during that phase, the thing will be really easy, but doing the thing is not your goal. You know, who cares if I eat inside of an 8-hour eating window for a few days? The impact on my life is roughly zero. Just that is not the objective there at all. The objective during the novelty phase is to figure out how I can create this habit in a long-term way. Like that's the only reasonable goal. And again, the objectives is for this habit to just disappear into my life in a way that is almost invisible, where just, oh yeah, I don't eat, you know, before this time and after this time, and I've always done that and I don't even think about it anymore. That's the goal. So step one, create the novelty phase. You know, build up the motivation, just put yourself in that environment where you're excited. And I would even say that if you aren't excited about something, maybe that's just not the time to work on it. Okay, I really think you need that novelty phase a little bit. You know, if you're just not in the mind space to be thinking about diet, then maybe that's just not the time to do it. But anyway, create the novelty phase. During the novelty phase, I think what you do is you just sort of try stuff and try to figure out what, like, you're looking for the cue and the response, and you're trying to create that in a way that's stable and it feels good and everything just kind of clicks. And like you were saying, you had thought, well, I'll just do pull-ups before breakfast. And then you try it and you realize, you know what, this isn't working. And the problem there is that the cue is backwards, like I said. Or maybe you just don't feel like doing pull-ups in the morning. What I eventually found that worked for me for pull-ups was I do pull-ups after I've taken the dog for a walk, when I'm walking through the back door and I hang his leash up inside, because the stairs kind of go up back into the house and then they go down into the basement where the pull-up bar is. And so that's the moment of when I'm at that threshold, I go down instead of up to do my set of pull-ups, because it's a very specific cue and it happens every day and it's at the same time. And it's like this, it kind of solves the procrastination problem where there's always a future moment to do it. You know, if you think, well, I got to
Right.
do pull-ups before, you know, before I go to bed, well, it can be 7 p.m. and you're like, well, there's still 4 hours before I go to bed. And then it can be 8:30 and you think, well, there's still this much time before I go to bed. And there's never a moment. You need a moment. And that
I wonder
moment
if
needs to create the trigger.
like you going for a walk sort of, because it's a physical activity and it kind of wakes you up, you're outside,
Yeah.
if that sort of primes you to do another physical activity like pull-ups. My problem was that I'd spend the first 2 hours of the morning, you know, in art mode, and I'm all, you know,
Mm-hmm.
in thinking mode, and then I go into the kitchen with my pull-up bars in the kitchen, and I don't want to switch to that
Mm-hmm.
other brain state. I want to just keep thinking about art stuff. I don't want to do physical. I don't want to. I don't want to have to do the pull-ups. I don't want to change into that other mindset.
So that is actually another, I think, really important piece of it too, is that your mind exists in these very different states. I mean, you can be dead asleep, right? And you can't do pull-ups then. Or you can be very relaxed and focused on something, or you could be doing creative work, or there's this whole spectrum of different ways your mind can be functioning. And trying to force your mind and body to do something that's totally opposite to its current state is, I think, not a good formula either. Same problem. At first I had thought, well, I'll do pull-ups right when I wake up. But I don't want to do pull-ups right when I wake up. I'm half asleep. I don't have energy or adrenaline or anything. It's the total opposite. So it feels bad. I could force myself to do it, but it's not pleasant at all, and that's not sustainable. Like, I'm going to have to grind that out every time. But after the dog walk, when I've had some time to wake up, but I'm not doing anything else yet, that's like the perfect time. It felt natural to me. So I totally agree. I think trying to match the thing you're going to try to do with your mental state is really important.
Okay, well then how do you feel about, okay, let's say when we started doing our little quest thing where I'm trying to get up at the same time every day.
Yeah.
At the beginning, for the first week and a half, maybe a week or so, it was hard to get up at the same time. It really was.
Yeah.
And I really had to force myself, and I wasn't really enjoying it. But after a little while, it became sort of natural. And even though I was fighting against my natural feelings at first, they became natural after a while. So how do you
That's
feel
true.
about that? Do you think it would be possible to, change the pull-ups at that same time into a more natural way of working, or what do you think?
So very good question. I think in the case of the sleep thing, I mean, it's pretty well known that your body has a circadian clock, that's dictated by the suprachiasmatic nucleus and everything, and that, like, there's a process there that will adjust.
It's supra chiasmatic.
That's what I said.
I think you said super.
I didn't, because I am snobby about that too.
Okay,
Because
well, I
for
just want
whatever-
on record that we both know it.
Okay, good. Yes.
I don't want
Yeah.
you to always get to say it.
Well,
Okay, continue. Sorry.
probably mispronouncing it in some other part of the word anyway.
Probably. I hope no smart people listen to us.
Yeah. Hopefully not. Banking on it. Okay. Okay, let me ask you this. If you decided, okay, I want to get up at 5:30 every morning, and you started doing that, and it was just as hard now as it was when you started, you think you'd still be doing it?
No. God,
Right.
no.
So, like, the only thing that makes that work is the fact that your body adapts to it, to where you get, your circadian clock adjusts, you get a little injection of adrenaline and cortisol, and your melatonin drops at that time. Like, your body adjusts to where it becomes awake at that time, and then it becomes easy. In fact, it can become to the point where you can't sleep past that time. People will say that all the time if they're on like a really rigid schedule. They're up late, and they'll say, "Oh, I'm gonna sleep in tomorrow," and they can't. And they say, "I got up at 7:30. I just couldn't sleep past that." Like, you'll adjust so far that you can't even voluntarily override that your body doing that. So anyway, in that case, your body adapts, and so that after a period of time, it will be easy. It will become natural. So in the case of like the pull-ups things first thing in the morning, maybe my body would adapt to that. I'm not sure though, because the pull-up thing was do a set of pull-ups, a single set that's pretty hard, not necessarily right to failure, but pretty close. So that's a hard set of pull-ups, and I think you need a little bit of adrenaline to feel good about that. So I'm not sure if you just did that first thing out of bed that would ever feel amazing. But I
Right.
don't know. But regardless, that's kind of okay. Going back to the formula thing, that's part of the novelty phase is where you do stuff and you try it and you. It's a little tricky, right? Because if you only do something for a day or two, it's hard to tell if it's going to feel good in 2 weeks. But that's
Right.
what you're evaluating. You're trying to think, what is my cue? Is it going to work long term? Is it, ordered correctly along the timeline of like the cue comes before the action? Obviously, again, you can't cue things off of you just being excited about something. So when does it happen? Does it feel good? Does it all of that stuff?
Right.
So that's your objective there in the novelty phase.
Yeah, and I've started to pay attention to that feeling of, is this going to work or is
Yeah.
this not going to work? And with pull-ups, we did this pull-up challenge, I think, in our Discord. It was for a month or 2 months or something,
Mhm.
and I remember like it went far past the novelty phase.
Yeah.
It went far past that. But I had these little internal goals I wanted to hit. I wanted to hit 10 and then I wanted to hit 20 or whatever. And I wanted to keep going up. And that was really exciting. I mean, it continued to be exciting, even though it wasn't, necessarily novel or new to me.
Yeah.
And that felt like it was working. I was doing it every day. I was excited to do it most days, but it felt good overall. And then I don't know, something happened and we kind of dropped off and it was just sort of me doing it by myself. And I could tell the feeling, the motivation was just different. And there was no clear thing that I wanted to achieve. There was no end date.
Yeah.
There was no accountability. Just it was gone. The feeling of it being right was gone. And I kind of kept doing it anyway, but it just felt like a losing
Right.
game. Like there was no happy end in sight. So I've started paying attention to that feeling in a lot of the different habits that I've been trying to do. And if it's not working, I try to find ways to make it work. What are some ways that you do to make it right? If you want
Yeah.
to keep it around but it doesn't feel right, what do you do?
Well, okay. Slight question dodge, but I'll circle back.
Okay.
So
You're allowed
I-
to pass. All right.
no. I want to answer that, but I think that the difficulty of the habit once it's solidified, I'm not talking about novelty phase, but once you're there where you've established it, it's in the right spot and the cue and everything, the difficulty of the habit has to kind of match how much you care about it. So for example, it's sort of a weird thing, but I have very flexible hips.
Okay. That's
I'm
just,
not-
I was not expecting you to say
I-
that, but okay.
I know. I'm not very flexible anywhere else. You know that stretch, I think they call it like the butterfly stretch or something, but like you sit on the floor and take your feet and kind of pull them in to your crotch and your knees are out on the sides like that.
Sure.
You can visualize
don't
what
re-
I'm explaining.
Yes, I can.
Right.
I'm not going
Sitting
to ask
flat.
you to demonstrate, but
I can't, the angles are wrong. I can't get
Okay.
myself up high enough to show you.
yes, I know what I think.
All right,
I
you're
know.
on the floor, you pull your feet and your knees are out, your knees are bent tightly and they're sticking out to your sides, right? And so if you aren't very flexible, your knees are maybe like 45-degree angles relative to the floor. And if you're more flexible, your knees kind of can get lower to the floor. Okay, yeah,
Yeah, sure.
all right. I'm very flexible in that way. I can drop my knees to the floor. Very open hips. If you put me in a room with 100 people, I don't know for sure, but I think I would be like top 2 or 3 in terms of hip openness. But at least if they were dudes. Women tend to be more flexible. And the reason for that, so some people are, I mean, I've witnessed this. Some people will make a goal of, I really want to be more flexible. And so they'll start trying to stretch every day or something. But that takes time and you got to do it at, and nobody ever gets anywhere. But man, I got these super open hips. The reason is that ever since I can remember, when I sit down, pretty much in fact, right now is what I'm doing. I will have one leg on the floor, just like normal. I'm sitting in a chair, so my knee is bent at like a 90-degree angle. And then the other leg will be up to where my ankle is sitting on my knee. Can you follow that? So,
Yeah, yeah.
my left leg is sort of twisted open on its side. And I just, ever since a kid, that if I sat down in a chair, that's just how I would sit. And that left hip would just be there'd be pressure and it would be held very open like that. And I noticed when I was probably 15 or 16, I'd lay down on the floor, just totally flat with my legs sticking straight out that way. And my left leg would be flopped over on the ground. And my right leg is like at a 45-degree angle. And I looked at that like, what the hell? Why is one leg just way, way more flexible than the other? Like, this is weird. Is there something, what's wrong? Do I have some kind of strange thing going on? And after a while, I figured it out. Like, oh, I always sit with my left leg, my left ankle on my right knee. And so I thought, well, I don't want that. Who knows what problems that's going to cause. So I just thought, okay, well, I'm going to sit with my right leg on my left knee sometimes. And at first it was super stiff. Like my knee would be way up there. I'm like, wow, this is so weird. But after a little while, it would just kind of settle in. And then I just, without ever thinking about it again, would just sit with one leg on the other. Okay, this is a dumb story. But the point is that I don't give a crap about having flexible hips. I mean, like it's good. It's probably good for me, but just that's not on my list of things that I care about or ever think about. But also, the habit of just sitting that way is utterly unconscious. Don't care about it. It's just the way I sit. Haven't, other than that one moment of, oh man, I should try to do this sometimes with my right leg instead of my left. That was the only thought that ever went into it. It's just a thing that I do. So I believe that I will have very flexible open hips for the rest of my life. And I don't care, but it doesn't matter because the habit is completely unconscious. It's just a thing that just happens. So that's one end of the spectrum, which is if you don't care about something, but also you're able to create a habit that is zero thought and zero effort, then cool, like you're done. That habit is completely sustainable, and it has been for me. If you have something that requires a habit that's much more difficult, again, like every morning you want to go for a 30-minute run, well, there is no eventual point where that's completely unconscious. I mean, it takes effort, it takes time, no matter what, to go for a 30-minute jog every day. So you're gonna have to care about the results of doing a jog for that to ever be sustainable. And if you get to the point where the amount you care about the results of the habit, drops too low, and the effort of the habit is too high, and you can't improve it because of the nature of the thing, well, then that might just not be the thing to do anymore. That was sort of a very long, weird answer to your question, but does that make
I liked
sense? Okay.
Yes. Okay, I think this is related. I'm not going to talk about my hips, but
But you
I've
can
been
if you
trying
want.
to develop like to couple all the focused work in the morning that I've been doing from the Quest art stuff. I'm trying to just even it out with some fitness in the afternoons.
Yeah.
And it's been difficult because in the past I would do the workouts in the morning, but I've shifted them to the evening, and so I'm in a different headspace. Things are it's just been a little bit harder to get into it. But I wrote down like what to do on each day. So I have this list of each day, and I just I took a guess at what would work, and so I wrote that down for each day. And then every day for the past few weeks, I've been checking off days that I've done it, and for 2 weeks in a row, Saturdays I've missed, which, I miss it once. Maybe it's just an anomaly. I miss
Sure.
it twice, and it's okay. Well, what's going on? So, and it was one of my more intense workouts because I figured, oh, Saturday I have all day. I can spend some more time on it. So,
Right.
on the third week, I decided, okay, well, I'm not going to get rid of it completely, but doing that much is definitely not going to work. So I'll just simplify it. Like I'm going to move the time of it a little bit to make it easier. And I'm going to, cut it way down. So instead of doing a big workout, I'm doing this tiny little workout to make it more manageable. So, and I think that way of thinking has been really helpful. I guess on Saturday, I'm so consumed by finally having some time to work on my art stuff and house things that are going on that I just don't want to drop everything and go do the workout. So I don't care about it much at all. So I'm trying to match the goal with the amount that I care, which is very little.
Well, yeah, no, that's perfectly related. I think that's what I was struggling to say there with that weird story about my hips. Um, I mean, I was kind of talking on like a long-term scale, but even inside of a single week, you know, the value of that thing changes on a weekday versus a weekend where, okay, Saturday, Sunday, you have this thing that you're very excited about, the main quest thing, and that's, you know, what your mind wants to do. That's what you care about in that case. So, you know, doing a bunch of bench pressing and whatever, that's just not very valuable to you. And so I think shrinking that habit down is exactly what you should do, because again, there's that balance of, you know, the result of this habit, how much do I care about it versus the difficulty of it. If you're having to carve out an hour and 20 out of this extremely valuable time that you care so much about to do a habit that at least in that moment you aren't really that into, then yeah, that's not sustainable. That's like a net negative if you're just doing the math.
Right. And I think in the past, if I missed a workout, right, I would be, oh man, I got to make up for that. I got to double down and do, you know, a workout that's twice as long next time. And so you try to do that and you just multiply the amount of work, and then it completely falls apart. So, yeah.
Okay, so real quick, similar thing that I had happen. So we did kind of a meditation challenge a little while ago, and we're all hyped up on meditation and how great it was. And I stand by all of that, but at the same time, I stopped because, you know, the novelty phase ended, and I think it's valuable, but at the same time, you know, it's 20 minutes every day or something, and I only have so much time, and you know, the results of that I just kind of started caring about less. So that just fell away. And instead of me doing what I should have done, which is to just think about it and say, you know what, I don't care about this that much right now, so that's fine, I'll just set it aside. Instead, I just have this, oh, I failed at another thing, I suck, whatever. So I go through that cycle. But so I'd stopped doing it for a long time. But the past couple months, my life has been a little different because of, you know, the main quest, where I'm starting work an hour and a half to 2 hours earlier, and I'm doing some very focused, exciting and rewarding and all that, but nonetheless challenging, focused work on my project before I start my job. And that's just demanding. That's like a good chunk of time that happens every single day. And I have noticed that around 1 or 2 p.m., my heart rate is elevated. I start to feel kind of anxious, and just I don't feel that good. And I feel like my sympathetic nervous system is too active. Like I'm just too revved up. And this has been happening for a while, and it doesn't feel great. And I wasn't totally sure why. You know, I've tried different things like, oh, maybe diet isn't right, or maybe I'm not sleeping that well or whatever, but no, those things are pretty much in place. And so that actually eventually brought me back to meditation, and that my mind has been active for so long that it's starting to become really fatigued and overstressed, and like I'm just getting overwrought. And so at that point, I'm thinking, let's try meditating. And so I would do it at that time, like around 12:30 or so. I can eat lunch and then go meditate. So cue response, but then it's there for a very specific reason, which is this keeps happening to me, and it made a huge difference. I just would be so much calmer and feel much more recovered, and I wouldn't get into that arc of feeling anxious and the heart beating and everything. I'm like, wow, okay. So now at this moment, my value of doing 20 minutes of meditation is way, way higher than it was a couple months ago when it's like, oh yeah, it's good, but what problem is it really solving? And so it just completely shifted that for me, and like it makes so much more sense to do that now, and that's what I've been doing, and it's super rewarding.
See, I think that's a perfect example of you working on a habit for a specific purpose.
Right.
Whereas it's much harder to just, read some stuff about, oh, meditation is good. Oh, I'm going to try to do it every day, whatever. Like that's going to go away. But now you have a specific reason for it, and it fits right in.
Right.
And that's how it should work. And actually, it means that it probably will work.
Yeah. I think the overall point with habits that I think we're both trying to get at here is that the way we think about them by default is completely wrong. And we think about them in this weirdly personal, am I a good or bad person? Do I suck at life kind of way? Almost every time when you're engaging with a habit, you by default tend to just evaluate yourself as a person and consider yourself a failure. And it's just funny how I think the recipe for habits is relatively simple. And if you sit down and think about it, it's pretty logical. Again, like the cue needs to follow the arrow of time where it comes before the thing you do. Right? That seems very obvious. You can't try to establish a habit around you being excited about something if you know that you aren't going to be excited about it in a few weeks. That also seems very obvious. You need to value the habit enough to where it balances out the effort that you put into it. That also is extremely simple and obvious. But again, we tend to not think that way. But if you think about habits objectively, they seem much simpler and easier to reason about. And oftentimes, like the reason you drop a habit is much more straightforward. And the way you should create a new habit, I think, is much more straightforward and less around, oh, I suck, I'm bad, my willpower, whatever. And it's more like, oh, no, this was dumb. This didn't really work.
When we think about habits, we typically view them in these little, like the habit itself is this isolated thing, right? Yeah. So you're going to meditate every day now at 1:00 or whatever, or I'm going to do pull-ups every morning at whatever time. And we just view it as this little thing, this little chunk that gets put into our day. But that depends so much on everything else in the day. Say you wake up at the same time for 5 days in a row, and you're able to get all of your habits in and whatever, Monday through Friday. And then Saturday, you sleep way in. And you screw everything up. Every single habit gets lost. Because everything hinges on that like daily, I don't know, consistency, that predictive schedule. So I've lost tons of habits just by a bad sleeping schedule. That's why I think that the sleeping one is so important. But it's like if you're in a little boat on the sea of life. And when it, if it's calm, you're able to keep going. And if it gets a little choppy, you're fine, you keep going. But if there's like a major storm, you're going to get blown off into some random deserted island and not know where you are. You're going to have to reconsider everything, replot out your map and where you're headed. Recalibrate your entire voyage. So these little habits, I think they should be considered with everything, not just them by themselves.
Well, and okay, so I think getting up at the same time every day is the most important habit that I have. For that reason, is that it's almost like a branching tree or something. Like every day, you make the deviation at the start of the day, and you're still roughly on course, but pretty soon it just becomes absolute chaos. If you're getting up late, You missed a bunch of things you normally do in the morning. Maybe you usually eat breakfast, but then you didn't. So now lunch is different. So now you feel different.
Right.
So now you work later, and like it just by the end of the day, it's absolute chaos. Uh, yeah. So I 100% agree that like there's this whole chain of things that happens. What we talked about, I think it was last week. Yeah, it was last week. Like the main quest thing, right? Where we're both feeling really good about what we're doing every morning, and it feels easy and effortless, and it's it's frustrating that you can't do it for longer. It's really a wonderful feeling for something that in the past has felt extremely difficult to do. And at now you're kind of like it feels weird almost, but you're not using willpower to do this thing, to work on your
Hmm.
project. It feels great, but think about all the effort and willpower that went into all the things around that created this thing. You know, the
Right.
regular routine, the knowing how to approach it, the knowing when to stop, and keeping things somewhat contained so that it doesn't, blow up and disrupt your whole day. And we've talked a lot about how to keep yourself out of those, dumpster fire episodes where things get totally out of control and you get super fatigued and burnt out and depressed and all that. Like there's all this stuff around it that has gone in to create this habit that feels effortless. And I think that's true of all kinds of things, all different habits throughout your life, where hopefully it will feel effortless, but it can take a lot of effort to get it there or to keep it in place. Or again, you have a simple goal of I want to drink a glass of water when I wake up, right? And that can, even something as simple as that can be really difficult, at least at the start. But it can feel easy eventually, but only if your morning routine is somewhat in place, where you're waking up at the same time and you're not in a desperate scramble to get to work, or you forgot something, and or you're waking up in a panic because you didn't work yesterday even though you're supposed to. Like there's just all this stuff around it that needs to be there to allow this very simple habit to exist in this very simple, effortless kind of way. It feels like we get fixated on a single thing too much without seeing the big picture. I think, like you're saying, where
Right.
there's all kinds of other almost things that feel completely unrelated. Me getting off the computer and picking up a book at 10 p.m. That affects my ability to continue to do some simple habit days later, because
Yeah.
that gets me to bed at the right
Exactly.
time. It gets me up at the right time. It gets me feeling in the right mindset at the right time. Like there's this whole spectrum of things that happen based on that very simple thing that you wouldn't naturally relate to, oh, my performance at work on Thursday and what I did Sunday night.
Exactly that. Yes. All right. We can end with that. I think that
Yeah,
was good.
I don't know how long we've been talking, but it feels like a really long time. All right, so just to close, for anybody who did do the habit challenge, it was a bit of a crappy challenge for the reasons we laid out, and that's on us, and we're sorry. It was ill-defined. The time window was too long. There was no specific cue for when you would do it. There was just all kinds of things that were not great about it. But it's a good learning opportunity, a good way to reflect on habits. And the main takeaway, I think, is when it comes to habits and challenges and things like that, maybe like blame the plan, the formula, blame us before you blame yourself. Because I think that more often than not, like it just the plan is bad to start with.
Yes. And fight against the tendency in popular culture is if you mess up, you buckle down and work harder and harder. But for
Yeah,
habits, if you mess up, make it easier.
yeah,
And
yeah.
if you're, don't be hard on yourself, be easier on yourself. Make it so, like we did the 2 minute challenge,
Mhm.
and that was an exercise in making it the easiest it could possibly be. So we did something for 2 minutes every day, and it worked spectacularly. Um,
And it has to, right? Like if you just think about it, it has to. What we were saying, how if the habit is harder than the amount you care, that's not sustainable. Like
Yeah.
it has to be easy, because if it's hard, you can't do that forever. Just it's that simple. So
But you can do easy stuff forever.
right,
And then
right,
as you keep doing it because it's easy, you want to make it a little harder, then you make it harder. But
right.
yeah.
Right. All right. So that's us on habits. So thanks again. Sorry for that. And we kind of, because of stuff and things in life and reasons, we didn't have a challenge for July this month, but we'll figure out something better for next month. And we'll let you know next week or the week after, however the calendar stuff works out. All right. So thanks again for hanging with us. Remember, you can leave us comments here on YouTube or on well, you can't usually leave comments on podcast platforms. You can leave a review, which we super appreciate. Even if it's bad, you can tell us why we suck. That's okay.
We need reviews. Please give us reviews.
Yeah. Right. Not to beg. So there's that. And then you can support the channel on via podcast platforms. There should be a link in the show notes, or through YouTube. And again, thank you so much to everybody who does that. And we have merch if you want to check that out. Otherwise, thanks for listening. See you next week.